Hello everyone and good evening. Don Arleth here and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw on TVP World. NATO looks to shore up Russian sabotage attacks in the Baltic Sea by deploying more ships to patrol areas of critical infrastructure and catch the Kremlin red-handed. This deterrence is being led by the United Kingdom. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first up, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. It's complicated. Instead of one day, Trump plans to end the war in Ukraine in 6 months. Illegal immigration and the economy, top priorities in German elections. And Poland's Nobel Prize winning TOKARCZUK gets a Dua Lipa boost. 10 NATO vessels will be sent to the Baltic Sea to protect critical underwater infrastructure. They will patrol the waters to reduce the risk of sabotage. The move, initiated by the United Kingdom-led Joint Expeditionary Force, is a response to last month's cutting of power cables and similar incidents occurring on NATO's eastern flank. Marek Steele reports.
Alarm bells were set off across NATO's eastern flank on Christmas Day as another undersea cable was damaged. The power link connecting Finland and Estonia is believed to have been damaged by a vessel belonging to Russia's so-called Shadow Fleet. Eagle S reportedly dragged its anchor for dozens of kilometers, severing the cable.
Finland successfully intercepted a Shadow Fleet vessel, and we will look into the legal and other conditions for better protecting infrastructure located in international maritime areas.
As part of the investigation, Finnish police have found new evidence: the missing anchor.
The location where the anchor was found is along the route of the Eagle S towards the western end of the drug trace found on the seabed.
NATO will now send 10 vessels, like this one, to take part in a mission to protect underwater infrastructure in the Baltic.
The moment they see that we are there, the chance that such an act of sabotage will take place is much smaller, because then they are caught red-handed, and then it is easy to act.
En dan is het makkelijk om actie te nemen.
Allied vessels will sail near cables and other installations to track potential threats and monitor the Russian Shadow Fleet.
Joint Expeditionary Force partners and NATO will be alerted by the system of any ships deemed a risk to key areas of interest.
We want to know what the Russian Shadow Fleet is. And one aspect of Nordic Warden is to pinpoint those ships which are behaving suspiciously, for example, by illegally turning off their identification signals.
Poland's Prime Minister recently proposed enhancing NATO's presence in the Baltic.
The Baltic should become an area of enhanced military control by NATO and the Baltic states, similar to the protection of our airspace.
But Poland is not part of the Joint Expeditionary Force, which oversees the new Baltic mission. Its members include the UK, the Netherlands, Nordic countries, and the Baltic states.
Any European initiative aimed at improving our security is an initiative we should participate in. We must remember that so far Poland has only a few of these underwater installations, but soon the construction of offshore wind farms will begin. They will be an ideal target for the Russian Federation.
The first NATO vessel will appear in the Baltic at the end of this week. The operation is expected to last until April.
He said it would take just one day. Now, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump hopes to end the war in Ukraine in just 6 months. This adjustment to a key campaign promise comes less than 2 weeks before he returns to the Oval Office. Trump also criticized the previous U.S. administration for promising NATO membership to Ukraine and said that he, quote, understands Russia's feelings on the matter. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
At his pre-inaugural speech on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump responded to a question on how soon he hopes to end the war in Ukraine.
I hope to have 6 months. No, I hope long before 6 months.
Less than a year ago, Trump sang a different tune before the U.S. presidential election.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled quickly. I will get the problem solved, and I will get it solved in rapid order, and it will take me no longer than one day.
Ukrainian officials are hardly surprised the Republican president-elect is going back on his election promise. According to one of them, ending the war that quickly sounded impossible from the get-go.
Donald Trump is a very powerful man, but he's not a wizard, and it was clear that he can't stop the war in 24 hours, even not being in the office. And even being in the office, he can't stop the war in 24 hours.
But the 47th US president has also made headlines for sympathizing in his pre-inauguration speech with Russia and Moscow's rhetoric on NATO expansion to the east.
So, a big part of the problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine. Now, they've said that. That's been written in stone. And somewhere along the line, Biden said, no, they should be able to join NATO. Well, then Russia has somebody right on their doorstep, and I could understand their feeling about that.
Former NATO official Edward Hunter Christie points out that Donald Trump's statement is nothing short of echoing Russian propaganda.
But there was never any notion that NATO would be preparing an offensive, aggressive operation against Moscow. It's very important, I think, for all viewers to understand. Fundamentally, NATO is a voluntary alliance of sovereign states, and each state chooses and has chosen historically to become a member of NATO.
While NATO has promised to welcome Ukraine into its ranks in the future, it hasn't yet enabled Kyiv to start the integration process.
Oh, it's today!
It remains to be seen whether Donald Trump officially retracts that promise when he returns to the Oval Office on January 20th.
And now joining us to discuss the Ukrainian reaction to Donald Trump's difficulties to swiftly end the war and the prospects of a timely ceasefire is our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. Now, has there been a response from Kyiv to Trump's latest remarks?
Well, President Zelensky recently gave a press conference with the Finnish foreign minister who is in Kyiv, and he did react to Donald Trump's remarks, downplaying them, saying, don't draw conclusions about the policy of the US right away. We need to work to do everything possible that Ukraine receives decent security guarantees worthy of our people that could stop Putin. We will work on this. So ultimately, Zelensky is not really responding to these sorts of daily kind of, Trumpisms, as it were. That's not going to be the strategy here, the diplomatic strategy going forward, trying to figure out Trump policies in the White House by the remarks that he makes in speeches. So very much downplaying it here in Kyiv.
All right, now, Oz, more attacks on Ukrainian cities, killing civilians. Can you give us an update on these attacks?
Yeah, and a strike on an industrial facility in the Zaporizhia region that was declared by the local regional military administrator and by President Zelensky. Unfortunately, 13 people have been killed and 18 people wounded in what is a massive glide bomb attack on Zaporizhia region. So Zelensky has paid condolences to the family and said it was a deliberate attack on the city. And he said, finally, they need to put pressure on Russia for this type of terror. And as you're seeing on your screens, another really barbaric attack on civilians in the Zaporizhia region by Russia.
Certainly, and I imagine this will continue at least until Donald Trump comes into office and probably even afterwards. Oz Chatterjee reporting for us from Kyiv. Thank you for your report. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's audacious declaration of taking control over multiple territories, including Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal, has sent shockwaves around the world. Sonia Agata Bischan brings us a selection of public reactions to Trump's latest revelations concerning his global ambitions.
Trump's desires for Greenland came under fire.
The idea expressed about Greenland is obviously not a good one, but maybe more important, it's obviously one that's not going to happen.
Reflecting on the broader land grab aspirations, which include Canada and the Panama Canal, Democratic U.S. Representative Jim Himes had a concise but telling remark.
It's bananas. It's insane.
Officials from the territories that Trump is interested in have also responded.
You know something, to the president, I'll make him a counteroffer. How about if we buy Alaska and we'll throw in Minnesota and Minneapolis at the same time? So, you know, it's not realistic.
I reiterate what President José Raúl Mulino has already stated. The sovereignty of our canal is non-negotiable.
We shouldn't be bought by anyone because Greenland is not for sale and Greenland will not be for sale.
Trump Jr. recently visited Greenland, an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark with self-government and its own parliament. Trump Jr. claimed it was purely for tourism, but his father's remarks point to an additional motivation.
We need Greenland for national security purposes. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world.
As Greenland is geopolitically a part of Europe, Trump's remarks have prompted reactions from across the continent.
Of course, we were right to mention that Greenland is a European territory. And of course, it is out of the question for the European Union to let any nation in the world, whichever it is, and let me say starting with Russia, attack its sovereign borders.
In my discussions with our European partners, a certain lack of understanding has emerged with regard to recent statements from the United States. The principle of inviolability of borders applies to every country.
Trump's grand plan also includes Americanizing the Gulf of Mexico's name.
So we're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name.
Locals do not entirely share his enthusiasm.
He doesn't have the right to do that. As a Mexican, I'm really annoyed.
Some say that Trump's recent statements are a distraction from his promises, including ending the war in Ukraine in a single day. And while his remarks have provoked a wave of reactions, they should perhaps be taken with a grain of salt.
In my view, Trump doesn't want to conquer any country. He just uses these tactics to pressure Canada, to pressure Greenland, to get what he wants as regards what he understands as strategic American interest.
With Trump set to be sworn in as the 47th U.S. president on January 20th, the world will soon discover more about what those American interests entail.
And now moving on to politics here in Europe, center-right Christian Union parties, which are leading the polls ahead of the German elections, have launched their campaign. They promise to stop illegal immigration and revive Europe's biggest economy. Ovidiusz Nichea has the details.
German union parties are united and ready to rule Germany. That's the message from the Bavarian Seeon-Saarbrück, where the frontrunners have launched their election campaign. A telltale sign of the Christian Union's confidence is this clock, counting down the time left to the elections, with the caption, "Political Change Countdown."
We are going into this election campaign not only united, but also with a great deal of optimism. However, we are also aware of the scale of the challenge facing us and the country.
Opinion polls see Friedrich Merz as the favorite to become the next chancellor. However, to gain power, he would have to craft a coalition. So far, Merz has excluded the possibility of cooperating with the far-right Alternative for Germany, as well as environmentalists from the Green Party. The prime focus of the campaign is on the German economy.
German economy is stagnating. There is sinking production. There is fiscal discipline that sometimes stops the investments. There are some disruptions between the German and Chinese trade relations.
There are numerous ideas on how to find a solution.
The state cannot subsidize competitive jobs in the long term. We need a policy that is prepared to question the rules that have been set in the past. When prosperity wobbles, democracy wobbles too. In this respect, the most important thing now is not to organize a change of government, but to bring about an actual change of direction and policy.
Another big topic is security and how much Germany should spend on defense.
Both the domestic interest in higher defense spending and also the foreign requests like those from Trump are way above what Germany has traditionally been spending.
The Greens want to ramp up defense spending to 3.5% of the German GDP, a proposal that the Social Democratic Chancellor Olaf Scholz has criticized as unrealistic. Under his leadership, the number has not exceeded 2%. The Christian Democrats believe the focus should be on giving the army what it needs, and not on a specific GDP percentage. The parliamentary elections in Germany are planned for February 23rd.
And now moving on to a bit of culture, the celebrity fan base of Poland's Nobel Prize-winning author Olga Tokarczuk has grown rapidly to include stars from Hollywood, such as Natalie Portman and the Game of Thrones heartthrob Pedro Pascal. Now her name is set to be turbocharged with a rare, no-holds-barred interview on music superstar Dua Lipa's hit Book Club podcast. Anastasia Yanchenko and John Todd have the story.
It's a fantastic book.
I have no doubt.
It's fantastic.
British pop star Dua Lipa sings her praises for Olga Tokarczuk's work, Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead. The award-winning Polish writer was given a worldwide boost last year when the chart topper named the book as a must-read. Now Dua Lipa's interviewed Tokarczuk for her Service 95 podcast and is continuing with the rave reviews.
Yeah, I was completely enthralled in the book until the very last page.
When I finished the novel, at the time I was smoker still, so I go out on the balcony and started to smoke, and then I started to cry as well, because it was such a pressure to write this entire story.
Other celebrity fans include Avengers actress Natalie Portman, who has also heaped praise on Tokarczuk, while Gladiator 2 star and bookworm Pedro Pascal has also promoted his appreciation. Experts say Dua Lipa's endorsement will expose her fan base to the Polish author.
She's an advocate for many, many different causes, and maybe that really opens up her fans to so many things that they're not really aware of.
That interview, this is kind of chance, confrontation as well, but also the marriage of two significant powers of high artistic literature represented by Tokarczuk, and the common, the universal popularity represented by Dua Lipa.
The combination of cultures has proved positive. Within hours of the podcast's release, it had received more than 50,000 hits.
And now to our main focus of the evening. More ships are being deployed to shore up Russian sabotage attacks in the Baltic Sea. So will this new strategy work? What, if any, consequences could it have for member states and for Russia? To discuss, I'm now joined by Louis Varenga, International Relations Institute at the Baltic Defense College. Hello, Louis. Good to see you, and thanks for coming on.
Great to see you again, Don, and thanks for having me.
Now, what areas will these additional ships focus on, and what challenges will they face in achieving this goal?
Well, so the important thing is to think about the Baltic Sea versus the Gulf of Finland. So Estonia and Finland will maintain maritime activities in the Gulf of Finland, but the 10 additional NATO ships will be amped up in the Baltic Sea region. And what they're going to be focused on is deterrence, but also monitoring what happens with critical undersea infrastructure. somewhere around 2,000 different vessels sail on the Baltic Sea on a daily basis, and not all of them can currently be controlled. And over the past couple of months, there have been, the Russians have upped the ante with hybrid attacks for critical undersea infrastructure. And on Christmas Day, I think that was the final straw. And now allies have decided that it is time to up the presence significantly and even use artificial intelligence tools to start monitoring and securing these critical undersea infrastructures.
So with 2,000 ships, at sea and 10 additional ships being deployed there, are they short of manpower and equipment to do this daunting task?
We could always use more. I mean, that's the honest answer. I mean, it's a really good start, especially considering that this is a signal to all allied countries. I mean, if you look at the JEF, it's the Nordic Baltic 8 plus the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, of course, being the framework nation there. I would suspect that more NATO vessels will be sent in the near future. One of the cables that was damaged will probably only be fully operational by August, and I think that. That was an assessment. And I've said before that with hybrid attacks that the Russian Federation is looking at increasing them in increments, but also increasing them in severity and just monitoring what the reaction is going to be. So it's a good start, but of course we'll always need to have more. I mean, knowing in advance what a particular company's ship, who owns it and which port they're sailing from port A to port B can be, with emerging technologies, they have the advantage of allowing us to track the actions of different ships and monitoring whether or not it comes within the vicinity of critical infrastructure. And if it does, then there's a possibility of escorting it away. And I do not think that right now Russia wants to test Article 4 or Article 5. The reality of it is that I think that we're close to a situation where Article 4 could be invoked. Maybe not Article 5. That's a little bit more serious. And I don't think that the Russian Federation wants to push allies right now, especially considering that January 20th is right around the corner. And it remains to be seen what kind of peace deal will be struck with Ukraine and what President-elect Trump is going to do with Vladimir Putin and his continuous escalation in hyper tactics. But I think that this is a step in the right direction and that it seems like allies are ready to move and move quickly.
Poland will not be part of this force. Do you think this is a mistake? And should Poland be boosting its presence, especially because of the Baltic gas pipeline, which is vulnerable?
Of course, I think a Polish maritime presence would be more than welcome, but Poland is a stalwart in terms of the land domain. And I think that decisions made by the Polish government within the last couple of years to significantly increase spending and beef up the support has contributed to the steadfastness of our security environment in that region, because I do not think that Poland would be a country that Russia would want to mess with, if I can speak colloquially right now, because in frank terms, I think that Polish forces would be able to decimate Russia on the ground. I have to admit, I don't know why the decision was made not to send ships to help with the maritime domain, but I think that potentially in the future they could, because of what you just mentioned. I mean, Poland also shares this coast and this region with us, and the security of neighboring allies really impacts the situation of Polish maritime security as well.
The aim of this patrol is to catch the Kremlin red-handed and also to deter, as you mentioned. How will it do so, since we've seen tactics used such as dragging anchors on the seabed and ripping these cables apart, which this can't be seen to the naked eye, at least. You mentioned AI. How will AI be used to help this force?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to tack on to one of the points that you mentioned about catching Russia red-handed. I think that is the most important thing, is taking away any form of plausible deniability. I mean, that is their bread and butter, because if you have plausible deniability, they can always say, well, we didn't know anything about it. It wasn't us. And, if they're caught red-handed, of course, with Kremlin propaganda, they'll probably still deny it, because they seem to put forward a very different form of reality than actual reality. But at least that will signal to the rest of the world, who's willing to think critically, that yes, this is a problem and they're doing this. Now, one of the things that if we bring in the JEF, the Joint Expeditionary Force, they've activated an advanced UK-led reaction system, which enables them to track potential threats to undersea infrastructure and monitor the shadow fleet. And that is something that I think they're going to be under constant scrutiny going forward, so that there's some kind of gotcha moment where we can say, yep, we can link this back. One of the operations launched just over a week ago, it's called Nordic Warden. What that does is it harnesses AI to assess data from a wide variety of sources, including AIS, which is Automated Identification System ships, which is used to broadcast the position of these ships and to calculate the risk posed by each vessel that comes into an area of interest. So however far away from critical undersea infrastructure that they designate, they can say this is a ship, it's in this area, so we're going to monitor it, and that could help have this so-called gotcha moment. And the JEF action reinforces existing and planned NATO responses. So that's kind of an added layer of countries that are in the vicinity, and then the UK, which is the framework nation both for the JEF and for the enhanced forward presence in Estonia. So they have skin in the game. And there are specific vessels that are identified by allies as being part of Russia's shadow fleet, and they've been registered into a system, so allies can closely monitor when they come to these key areas of interest. So if a potential risk is assessed, for example, then the system that's put in place will monitor these vessels in real time, and then they'll send out a warning to allies, which gets shared with each JEF participant nation as well as all NATO allies.
Now, concerning the shadow fleet, I mean, do we really know exactly what it is? Is it only to evade sanctions, or are there other tasks that it performs?
Well, I think it was primarily, first and foremost, to evade sanctions, but then somewhere along the line, I think that they got this clever idea to see how much damage that they can inflict, because, these hybrid incidences, I'll call them attacks if they are cutting undersea cables. I mean, a handful of times is no longer a coincidence. That's a pattern. And I think that it lets allies know that they're there and that they're willing to take a certain amount of risk, and they're willing to do things that will harm allies short of anything kinetic. I mean, the last ship that was captured by Finnish authorities, the crew, as I understand, was being fairly responsive and cooperating with Finnish authorities when they took the ship to port and started interviewing crew members. But I think that the sort of second point of existence for the shadow fleet is to operate also not just hybrid but reconnaissance missions. There's been evidence of espionage. So there were two ships. One was named Eagle Est, and the other one was, I think, called Swift Sea Rider. They were used, yes, to evade sanctions, but also to basically engage in spy operations. And Lloyd's List Intelligence, which is a shipping information service, listed this, in public. So they were crammed with, high-tech intel gathering equipment, which are used to monitor allied ships and aircraft. So there's reconnaissance, there's hybrid activity, and there's damage to critical infrastructure and evading sanctions. So there's kind of a cocktail of nefarious activity that these ships are engaged engaging in. And I think that now we have a window where we can really clamp down on this as allied countries and stop it from happening by close monitoring. But going back to an earlier question, yes, I think it will take more personnel power, and I would expect that to come rather quickly. The Secretary General Mark Rutte has responded very quickly to Finnish and Estonian requests for assistance, and I think that the swiftness is really a game changer because it's not taking a long time. There's no feet dragging in responding to this.
Well, let's certainly hope that this is the step in the right direction. Louis Varenga from the International Relations Institute at the Baltic Defense College. Thank you very much for joining me. Great to have you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.